Joining me now is Ming Kiwi Jung, who is the founder of a legal tech firm, Latch. Well, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Fiona.
So tell us a bit about why you started up the company in the first place.
Yeah, so my background is I was a corporate lawyer at a big law firm. So I knew firsthand that processes around working with contracts leave a lot to be desired. But at the same time, contracts are super important. They're actually the most important business innovation in human history, in my opinion, way back since Mesopotamia in 2300 BC when records for the first ever contracts started appearing. In fact, it's surprisingly difficult to find a record or an example of a human civilization that has left behind a record of writing, but hasn't also left behind a record of a contract. So contracts are super important. They're fundamental to business, and without them, commerce can't exist. And I think trying to improve the process of working with them is a really worthwhile mission.
So it must be quite different, though, working as a young lawyer to becoming an entrepreneur. What have been the chief things that you found perhaps different about the role?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I show up to work in a t-shirt and shorts most days, which is a bit of an adjustment. But other than that, I think maybe the main difference is at a law firm, the focus is very much on mitigating risk. Lawyers have to be a safe pair of hands, and the process of or the focus is on getting things right rather than being super fast and innovative necessarily. Whereas at a startup, the default position is that you're going to fail. That's the most likely outcome. So their focus is actually on moving really quickly and innovating quickly, even if it means that things aren't perfect the first time around.
What gap did you see in the market?
Yeah, so in our case, we thought contracting processes needed a lot of work, but we thought in particular there was a gap in the mid-market segment. So the kind of problems that mid-market companies face and really large enterprise companies face are really significantly different. The main difference is that if you have a small legal team at a mid-market company, you don't have anybody to delegate work to. Usually you're one, two, or three lawyers within a small team. You have to do every type of work, including all of the very mundane, routine contracting processes that pop up day to day. Contrast that to a law firm or a large enterprise company. You have a sophisticated support hierarchy of junior lawyers and secretaries to delegate work to. You have specialist departments. So we are really focused on the lower end of the market.
How much competition is there in this space? Because I know there's other companies, for example, like Lawview, who's doing quite well in this space as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of competition. It's a competitive space, but at the same time, it's a really nascent space. It's a hugely fragmented market. So there's no company out there that has huge market share in the same way, say, for example, the CRM market or the video conferencing market has. So most enterprise markets are pretty mature. Legal digital contracting is a market where we're still very early, and we're still 5 to 10 years away from seeing true, genuine market leaders emerge.
On the capital raising note, you've just raised a pre-seed round. Tell us a bit about that and who was involved.
Yeah, so we raised a 1.4 million USD pre-seed round, which works out to about 2.3 million NZD. We're supported by great investors in the US and in New Zealand, including angels who have built tech products you and I use every single day. We're also supported by VC firms like GD1 in New Zealand and Craft Ventures in the US, who are also investors in companies like Airbnb, Reddit, Meta, and Twitter.
So how did you get in front of the Americans and Daniel Gross as well, I understand?
Yeah, that's right. So in Daniel Gross's case, there was a cold reach out. And then from there, I was in San Francisco for 3 months, from May through to August. And I spent a lot of time calling every single person in my very limited Rolodex of contacts to get as many introductions as I could, and also a whole bunch of cold outreach. And thankfully, I was able to put together enough interested investors for the round.
Right. What are you going to use money for?
Yeah, we're using our funds to launch our digital contracting product and sell into the US. So we want to make sure that we want to sell into the US first. We think that's the biggest market in the world and the most important one for us to
You
capture.
are already selling in New Zealand, though, or?
No, we're starting by selling into the US. So from day one, we thought it was important to be focused on the American market. We don't think there's a good reason to start with New Zealand. We couldn't think of a good reason anyway, other than just pure inertia, because that's where we happen to be geographically based.
Does that mean you think that you will shift to the States at any stage, or you plan to stay in New Zealand?
Yeah, we're still figuring that out, but at the moment, it's looking like we'll probably end up moving to the States, or otherwise have some sort of model like similar to Rocket Lab, where you have a US and a New Zealand presence.
So why did you choose the US market to be your launch market?
We think the Bay Area is probably the best place in the world to build a startup at the moment. Still, even though even with COVID, we still think that's the best place to build a startup.
So the
And we
lure
think
of Silicon Valley.
yeah, exactly. And we also think that's the best place to sell into as well. There's a lot more money flowing around in that ecosystem, and the companies there are a lot more open to trying out products from crazy new startups as well.
Why did you go into law in the first place?
Yeah, so I think in some ways it was the default decision. I think for ambitious young people, usually, at least in New Zealand, usually you have a few options, and one of them is becoming a lawyer at a big law firm. So in some ways it was the default option. In another sense, I thought the idea of the law was really romantic. It was in the abstract sense, I really liked the idea of being a lawyer, and maybe one day being a judge was something I was keen on as well. So that's why I joined in the first place.
But you've decided you also obviously have that entrepreneurial bent because you co-founded another business while at law school. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so when I was in law school, me and a few friends started, it was really like a side business where we were helping parents and their children with tutoring. We ended up working with a few schools as well. And that was a really fun experience. The main benefit of that experience was this realization that we didn't need permission to sell things that people want. We could just go and do it. And that was a really liberating experience, and that led directly to me realizing I could do the same with Latch.
It actually grew to quite a big business though, didn't it?
Yeah, we ended up with over 100 tutors around Auckland. So we had a lot of yeah.
And I should imagine successfully selling the business too must have helped a bit with your tuition costs.
Yeah, it paid for a trip to Europe, which was nice.
And in terms of who do you see yourself ultimately appealing to in terms of your customer base? You've said you want to take the US market first. Who within the US market are you really chasing after?
Yeah, so we focus on in-house legal teams, small in-house legal teams at mid-market companies, which we define as companies with between 100 and 1,000 headcount, and companies with some kind of B2B sales component to them.
And what size is your company now?
At the moment, we have 5 employees.
Right. And do you have a specific revenue goal in mind for the first year, or what's your thinking?
Yeah, we want to use our current capital to get us to $1 million in ARR. That's annual recurring revenue USD, and we think our capital will last us at least 2 years.
So that goal is for within the first 2 years?
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Fiona. It was a pleasure talking to you.